All right, and we're live. Assalamu alaikum, Ramadan Mubarak, Shubho Nababorsho, and hello there, everyone. Welcome to the Independent University Bangladesh Climate Dialogue for 2021. We're so glad to have you here with us. University and high school students across the planet, along with civil society, faith organizations, and businesses will tune into 100 events in 50 countries. University hosted regional webinars critical to our future. You may ask, how can an ambitious green recovery based in state and local action put us on the way to solving climate change by 2030? Climate-concerned university and high school faculties worldwide and across disciplines will assign these webinars as homework, using them as a springboard for discussing regional climate solutions, energy justice, and a green recovery. Through this joint effort, we hope to fulfill the main motto of this project, which is to make climate a class. As special guests of the event, we have with us Mohammad Ekhtekharul Islam, who is a senior lecturer at from the Department of Environmental Science and Management from the School of Environment and Life Sciences at the Independent University, Bangladesh. We also have Tanvir Ahmed Haroon, sir, who's a lecturer from the Department of Environmental Science and Management from the School of Environment and Life Sciences from the Independent University, Bangladesh. We also have Shohail bin Saifullah, a project associate from the International Center for Climate Change and Development. So, Solve Climate by 2030. You might be asking, what is Solve Climate by 2030? Solve Climate by 2030 is a worldwide initiative by Bard College, New York, in association with the Open Society University Network. The project aims to make a difference in the environmental world, and the main motto of the program is to make climate a class. Through this webinar, we aim to really emphasize the importance of protecting the environment and how climate change affects Bangladesh as a whole. So let's get into it. To start off the webinar, we have a short intro from our partners at Bard College, New York. So right now, I'm going to play a video. So if you would like to see, so let's put the video on screen.
Welcome to the Solve Climate Global Dialogues. You're participating in one of 125 events held across the planet, including in almost all 50 US states, part of a global project called Solve Climate by 2030. My name is Eben Goodstein, and I'm an economist and director of the Graduate Programs in Sustainability at Bard College in New York, the lead organizer for Solve Climate. This last year has been difficult for everyone. As the world looks forward to recovery from COVID, we are focusing tonight on the most important question facing humanity. What can we do in this year in our regions to help solve climate change while supporting struggling communities that have faced widespread loss of life, economic disaster, and joblessness? Worldwide, from Australia to Kyrgyzstan, from Colombia to Malaysia, and from South Carolina to South Africa, Solve Climate audiences are hearing from local experts and young leaders about concrete steps that can really help nations solve climate change while creating much needed jobs and incomes for everybody. The year 2020 was one of the 2 hottest years in human history, bringing with it massive forest and grassland fires, record-breaking storms and hurricanes, and relentless rising seas. Solving climate is the challenge which the human species must now face. There's hope for the future. Solutions have continued to advance. This year, China committed to building a carbon-neutral economy, while the US rejoined the Paris Agreement. Solar, wind, and battery prices continue to fall, while major car companies have been rushing to electrify the global fleet. Worldwide, movements for Black Lives Matter and Me Too are leading in bringing much delayed and urgently needed justice to the world. Time is short. We have until 2030, 10 years to solve climate. We can get a lot done in this decade. We have the solutions, but only if we focus the world on climate solutions and justice, and then do the work we have to do in our own cities and regions. For students listening, you are the leaders. Without you, the future we envision will not come. I'm asking tonight for your help. We're going to discover powerful ideas for climate solutions and climate justice and how you can be a part of the solution. But this message must reach beyond those of us who are listening right now. Would you ask all your teachers this week in every subject to make climate a class? The teacher can assign tonight's webinar's homework for the students and then afterwards have a one-class period discussion. And we mean every subject, from art to engineering, psychology to business, dance to chemistry. Teachers don't need to be a climate expert to lead a discussion about climate change. The Solve Climate project has easy-to-use teacher's guides in nearly every subject and in 3 languages to help teachers make climate relevant to their class. It only takes courage. Don't take no for an answer. Ask them, why not? This is your future. You'll be surprised how many teachers will say yes and thank you. Imagine you, thousands of leaders like you around the world asking their teachers once every school term to make climate a class. That means every term going forwards, hundreds of thousands, millions of students worldwide in their classes talking about climate solutions. COVID has shown how fragile our global economy and society are to extreme events. It's also shown that vulnerable people are facing the hardest, most damaging impacts. This is also true with climate change. Science has made it clear that unchecked, global warming will mean an unending onslaught of extreme events, causing untold suffering for humanity and all creatures, species driven to extinction, a planet of environmental refugees. And yet, in many ways, this is the most exciting time to ever be alive as a human. We have the tools and networks and technologies to rewire the world with clean energy, reimagine the global food system, reinvent transportation, and regenerate forests and grasslands, and be well on our way to solving climate by 2030. Tonight, we will learn how to do this in our own cities, our own towns, our own regions. Thank you for the work you will do to promote climate solutions and a just world.
And that was absolutely amazing. That was a great introduction. And to follow the video, I would first like to invite our first speaker, Mr. Mohammed Ekhtekharul Islam, speaking on local knowledge for climate action. So, sir, if you would like to go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Ahmed. Thank you for inviting me in this webinar. I'm really honored to talk about the importance of local knowledge and how that actually contribute to the climate action. So I actually want to share the presentation slide. Okay, I think, is the screen visible?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay, so thank you. So the topic that I want to talk about today is the local knowledge for climate action. I increasingly feel and realize that the importance of local knowledge and its relevance with the decision-making process, especially when it comes to climate change adaptation and mitigation. Local knowledge is there is a missing link between the strategies that are made and the local knowledge of the community for whom the decisions are being made. So I increasingly am realizing this. Recently, I went to a kind of a field work in Shatkhira, and I talked to an NGO director who's a very known NGO based in coastal districts of Bangladesh. So he first pointed out that there is a missing link between what is happening in reality and how we, the academicians, think about a specific problem. And yeah, so from there, I'm actually inspired to work more on this missing link. And part of that process, as part of that process, I actually decided to choose this topic. So thank you once again for inviting me, and I'm very happy to have my colleague Tanvir Bhai also with us today, and I'm also very happy to have Shohail. Shohail was one of my very favorite students in my courses at IUB. I also worked with Shohail in the Green Planet Club, a student-based club at IUB. So we were kind of so we are colleagues as well. So thank you, and having said that, I'd like to start the discussion today. So today is the first day of the Bengali year. So I'd like to wish everyone the happy Bengali New Year, and also the Ramadan Mubarak. So this is a house from a remote village located in Chapainawabganj in the Rajshahi division. And this village is called Alpona Gram in Bangla, but the formal name of this village is Tikoil village. So this village got widespread attention, especially among the travelers and the tourists, for the outstanding artwork they do and the local practice they have been following for decades. Okay, so the women and the children kind of do this kind of artwork on the walls of their mud houses to celebrate various events, including Paila Boishak. And so this is kind of a local practice. By mentioning this local practice, I wanted to start this discussion today. So I'll also end with a local quote from a renowned person, and to kind of reinforce the importance of local knowledge, not just in climate action, but for the overall development of the country. So, so the contents of the discussion will be something like this. So I'll slightly touch on the theoretical aspect of the topic, that means the local knowledge, because local knowledge sounds a little vague. So for the discussion to be on the right track, at the very beginning, it's better to define the boundary, to what extent we are to how we are looking at this concept of local knowledge, what it is about, and how it is relevant with the climate action or sustainable development in general. And then I'll present two case studies, one from a coastal area and one from city kind of context. And I'll show you how ignoring the local practices, the local culture, and the local knowledge has caused severe problems and degradation of the environment, and kind of created a lot of human vulnerabilities. And from there, I will kind of conclude by saying the solutions that the local people have developed based on their interactions with the nature, based on their interactions between communities. And yeah, so that's how I'm going to follow the whole discussion today. So yeah, so at the very beginning, I'd like to introduce myself. And Ahmed already told about me. My name is Ekhtekharul, and I work in the Department of Environmental Science and Management at Independent University, Bangladesh. So yeah, so that's all. I don't want to mention more than this actually. Okay, so the first thing that I want to focus on is defining local knowledge. So many of us may think that local knowledge is actually very local. Okay, so when I say local, what does this mean? Local means it's coming from a rural area, or maybe it's coming from a remote village of Bandarban or any Chittagong Hill Tracts region. That's not necessarily true. Local knowledge can be very scientific. Local knowledge can come from any society, any community, regardless of the characteristics of the society, whether they're urban or rural. That doesn't really matter, because every single society, every single community have their own practices, own beliefs, own culture, own norms, and from there they develop certain knowledge that comes into the play related to development and climate action in general. So to me, local knowledge is the practice, the norms, the culture, the understanding about the nature and the natural processes and how that influence the communities. So all these belong to local knowledge. Okay, so it's a very vague term, and yeah, it includes cultural knowledge, it includes traditional knowledge, it includes indigenous knowledge, and of course it includes exogenous knowledge. I mean the knowledge that are coming from external sources. So for our discussion today, the definition is simple. The local knowledge is the knowledge related to the practices, the interactions with the nature and the communities, and from there how they develop understanding and how they develop experiences and stories and events and all that. So that's all about local knowledge, if I put it in a very simple way. And a little bit of theoretical discussion. I know I personally don't like much discussion about theory, so I always try to relate whatever the theory is. I always try to relate it to the reality or to the practical life. So anyways, for our discussion to be on the track and to easily follow the discussion, I'd like to explain where the local knowledge is in terms of the overall knowledge mechanism. So knowledge is a very complex thing, and it kind of develops through a complex process. So where does this local knowledge stands in this process of knowledge development? So I took this from a journal article, and the author calls it a knowledge nest, which I fully agree with. It's a knowledge nest. If you look at the picture that I put on the slide, so you see the outer layer. The outer layer, you see a lot of dots. So these dots actually represent an individual in a community. Okay, it's an individual, not necessarily a human being. It can be an individual institution. It can be an individual community organization. It can be an individual business entity. So it can be an individual human being as well. So everyone interact with each other, and this is how they learn, they observe, and they develop their experiences. So the outermost layer that I'm showing in this graph is the individual knowledge. That is individual's reflection and learning on the basis of his or her interactions with other community members, with other entities in the community, and also the person, the way the person interacts with the nature. So that's what is the individual knowledge. And the individual knowledge then influences the local knowledge. Okay, so if we kind of compile all these individual experiences, reflections, learnings, and if we put them together, so probably we are going to get a story. We are going to get a chronological something. We are going to get a historical aspect of an event. So that is local knowledge. That is local knowledge, and that's very unique. If you go to Bandarban, you will have a different experience, and if you go to Satkira, you will have a totally different story. You will have a totally different history. You will have a totally different way of interaction between nature and humans. So every single individual, not just the human being, but the business entities and the institutions and the organizations, they play a very critical role in this local knowledge formation. So the next layer is about the specialized knowledge. Here comes our role to play. Okay, so we actually take this space. What do we do? We go to those communities, we observe them, we interview them, we do scientific experiments, we kind of review past documents, and that's how we try to develop a specialized knowledge using our own lens. Okay, so for example, I'm from an environmental science background. So whenever I look at a problem that exists in a community, I try to use the lens of environmental science, or I have actually blended a kind of a background. So I studied environmental science and I also studied development studies. So I tried to combine the concept from development studies and environmental science, and utilizing that, I try to look at the problem. Think about an anthropologist, he or she will look at the problem through a different lens. Think about a political scientist, he or she will look at this problem using his or her own lens. So this is how our analytical thoughts, our own philosophies, our ideas contribute to the local knowledge and makes it a specialized knowledge. Okay, so based on that specialized knowledge, we create organizational knowledge. For example, what to do for a coastal environment, what to do for a coastal community, what climate strategy should we adopt, what climate strategy should we adopt for indigenous population. So that understanding develops from the specialized knowledge, and that's how we make plans, policies for different communities in a different way. And finally, in conclusion, we develop a holistic understanding of the whole community, of the whole country as a whole. Okay, so we got the idea about the coastal environment, we got the idea about the hilly mountainous region, we got the idea about the flash flood prone areas. So this is how we develop a holistic understanding. That's kind of the vision of a country, okay, that is reflected. For example, the 5th or the 8th 5-year plan of Bangladesh. Okay, so we are going to have the 8th 5-year plan where we have some broader objectives to achieve by next 5 years. Okay, so that's the holistic understanding that reflects everyone needs. Okay, in that 5-year planning, the government has included all this knowledge, all these understandings, and kind of devised a plan that serves everyone needs. So that's how we develop a holistic knowledge. So now, if you are following my discussion, you can probably realize how local knowledge plays a critical role in this whole process, in this entire process. So local knowledge is not just local, it can be even global, and definitely it has a very significant role to play at the national level, at the macro scale. Okay, so moving on, I already mentioned it, all societies possess a rich range of knowledge, and they try to make use of it in their everyday life. I'll give you examples, as I said earlier. The problem is, the problem is what I see in the how should I say, in the reality. I mean, when I go to field, what I see, the strategies, the development strategies, whatever it is, the general development strategies or environmental strategies, it is widely reported. Not just, this is not my opinion, this is also documented in research works, that the development strategies that we make and that we implement, that rarely takes the local knowledge into account. And many of these development projects fail to kind of achieve the desired outcomes, the anticipated results that we expect from this millions of dollars of investment that we make in the ground, that does not always make the expected outcomes. So the one of the key reasons, I'm not saying that ignoring local knowledge is the only reason. That's not the only reason. Ignoring local knowledge is one of the key reasons. That because that's why we are failing to achieve the expected outcomes, the changes that we are trying to make in the community. It's because we don't see the problem through the community's lens. We don't see the problem through their eyes. We see the problem through our eyes. I'll elaborate this further in the next slide. But the key point that I want to focus on is we are too much into the Western development philosophies. So the strategies, the ideas, the things are imposed from the top. Okay, so it's not decided from the bottom. It's kind of imposed from the top. That's why we don't always get the desired outcome. I'm not saying all the development projects are failure. I'm not saying that, but this can be improved further if we take local knowledge into account. Anyways, so moving on. So I see 3 domains of knowledge. I'm at the very end of the conceptual theoretical discussion. After this slide, I'll move on to the practical example. So this is probably the last slide about the theoretical discussion related to the local knowledge. So I see three domains of knowledge. Okay, so one is local knowledge that we already discussed, and the other one is the scientific knowledge that the experts develop. The problem is scientific knowledge remains in the scientific community. It doesn't go beyond the scientific community. Not always, but in most of the cases. Okay, so the scientists do some research for the vulnerable or the poor communities, but the outcome doesn't reach that vulnerable community, or the outcome cannot be translated into a kind of a fruitful situation in the ground. Okay, so the knowledge remains in the scientific community, and probably some people will disagree. The scientific community, I have seen that there is a tendency to feel very proud about the scientific community. So to me, there is no value of the scientific knowledge if you cannot translate that into an action that can reach the mass people, the communities at the root level, and the mass people can understand and read and implicate that knowledge in their everyday life. So the problem exists regarding this scientific knowledge is scientific knowledge rarely goes outside the scientific community. Okay, and there is another domain of knowledge. You may disagree with me, but that's my opinion about the scientific knowledge. And the policymakers' knowledge is the another domain of knowledge. These are the people who make decisions. Okay, and they need to be the most knowledgeable person, and their decision making must be supported by local knowledge and the scientific knowledge. Okay, but in a country like Bangladesh, the tendency that the culture that have developed over time is policymakers are the social supreme class. Okay, so their understanding is different as they think. So policymakers' knowledge also doesn't go beyond their territory. Okay, it doesn't reach the local community. So there is always a gap. There is always a gap, and there is a very poor connections. Okay, so there is a missing link between this. There are missing links between these three domains of knowledge, and I don't think it's very difficult to establish a link, kind of a links between these knowledge domains. It can easily be done. We can easily do it by having more dialogues, by appreciating the local knowledge, by developing a culture of respect. Okay, we must respect input for every single individual. I was actually following an interview on television, someone from a leadership position talking about the sufferings of the garment worker during this lockdown. So I think a garment worker may demonstrate this better because he is in the suffering. So listening from a garment worker will make more sense to me, maybe. So that's how I think. So respecting the culture, respecting various culture, accepting different opinions, having more dialogues between communities can create the desired linkages between these three domains. And the modern day concept that we are thinking about, I'm gradually entering into environmental aspect. I'm kind of yeah. So the triple bottom line that we talk too much about nowadays, which is kind of the concept of sustainable development. If we want to achieve that, we really want to achieve an economic growth along with making people happier, wealthier, and improving their well-being. At the same time, not degrading the quality of the environment. We must create the bridge between local knowledge, policymakers' knowledge, and scientific knowledge. And this is the root cause. This is the root cause behind certain failures. So we need to address the root cause. Without addressing the root cause, we cannot move forward. So probably we all know about the Paris Climate Agreement that has been recently made. in Paris in 2015, where all the global leaders agreed and vote to work for a better climate, and they also kind of decided to reduce emission, and they also kind of committed to improve the quality of human life everywhere in the world. So the Article 7 in the Paris Climate Agreement also reinforces the concept of local knowledge. It also reiterates the importance of local knowledge and how that can be an important component in the climate change adaptation strategies. And to me, it's not just adaptation, it's also about mitigation. I'll relate that later in my discussion, but it's also related to climate change mitigation. It's not just adaptation. Okay, so having said that, I want to move into the main discussion. So far, I just talked about the theoretical kind of an underpinning of the local concept and how that plays an important role in the decision making. At the end of the day, it's all about decision making, and climate action is also about the decision making from different authorities. So their understanding, their way of decision making, their way of interpreting information really matters a lot in climate action. So we have a lot of problems. We are going through a lot of environmental crisis, but that doesn't mean we don't have any opportunity. Okay, so where there is opportunity, where there is crisis, there is opportunities. Yeah. So I mean, I sometimes give examples in my courses that we had severe health problems that we overcome, and that through local innovation. So anything was not imported from abroad. We kind of made the innovation. I sometimes refer to the fact that the invention of oral saline, how that has solved the problem of diarrheal disease, where millions of children once died because of the diarrhea, but the problem is more or less under control, and it is a local innovation. So we have problem, definitely we have opportunities. We just need to carefully observe. We just need to integrate our own way of thinking. That's it. So I want to focus on the southwest coastal region of Bangladesh. So from here, I'm actually entering into the example that I wanted to give you, and I will definitely relate that how local knowledge could play an important role in solving this crisis. And yeah, so our southwest coastal region is kind of an it turned into an engineered ecosystem. So many engineered interventions have been made and implemented, and the experiments have been done without much regarding the local facts. The entire southwest coastal region is now a classic example of a failure of an engineered intervention, because of the engineered intervention. So if you look at the map, if I point it, so this is our coastal region, and this is kind of still in a formulation process. It's not yet fully stabilized land formation. Okay, it's still developing. So there has been this Ganges basin. You see the green area, and the light blue area is the Brahmaputra basin. And this large region, these two river basin, are contributing to the formation of this coastal region of Bangladesh. So this is a very complex system. This is very unique, and the ecological dynamics that we have in the coastal area is totally different from the other part of the country. And the engineers and the scientists have, in many cases, they have failed to realize these local facts, and they kind of come up with a one-size-fits-all approach, and that didn't work out. I'll show you that example as well. So you see, this is a more focused map. There are 4 districts in the southwest coastal region: Satkira, Khulna, Jashore, and Bagherhat. And in this map, you see 3 districts: Satkira, Khulna, and Bagherhat. And you see these red lines. These are actually the embankments. Okay, these are actually the embankments enclosing the floodplain. So the area that are enclosed by this red line, I mean the embankment, are called polders. I hope you heard about this. These are called polders. Okay, polder is a Dutch word, and this is a Dutch method. Dutch. This has been imported from the Netherlands, and Netherlands has been very successful in dealing with coastal flooding by using this polder method. So we imported this method in late 1960s. Okay, we imported this polder technique. So this is one. You see, there are 139 polders in our coastal region, and you see few of them in this map. Okay, so you see there is a numbering system. I don't know whether it is clearly visible, but there are numbers. Okay, so there are smaller polders, there are big polders, there are polders where there are several villages in one polder. So it's kind of enclosing the floodplain, from using embankments and kind of detaching it from the river. Okay, the rivers that we have in the coastal region, they have detached the floodplains by enclosing it with the embankments to prevent from coastal flooding, to boost up agricultural economics. Okay, so the purpose was good, the objective was good, but the point is they didn't consider the ecological dynamics of this region. Okay, the context in Netherlands and the context in coastal Bangladesh should not be the same. So that's the thing they couldn't realize. They still don't realize. Many of them still don't realize. Okay, so let's have a look how the coastal rivers work. Okay, how the coastal rivers work. So this is a coastal river, and the areas on both sides are the floodplain, and so the tides come in and the water floods the floodplain, and the sediments get deposited and the water goes back during the low tide. Okay, so coastal area is very unique, I'm telling you several times, because there are two tides on a single day. This is called semi-diurnal. Okay, so there are two tides happening on a single day in the coastal river. So water comes in, inundates the floodplain and goes back, and in this process the sediments get deposited on the floodplain, increasing the fertility of the land, and this has been happening for centuries. Okay, this area is also part of the mangrove forest, but because of human settlements, we have converted this into a kind of an economic zone or human settlement. So, but the dynamics exist. The dynamics exist. So what they did, they make an embankment on both sides of the river, so the water cannot kind of inundate the floodplain. So the water comes in and goes back, and there is no place for the sediments to go. Sediments get silted up in the river bed, so the river bed is rising up. Okay, so the navigability of the river is decreasing. So the entire and the floodplain, the height, the elevation of the floodplain and the elevation of the river, but there is a significant difference. So when there is rainfall in the floodplain, the water cannot go out. The water cannot be drained out through the sluice gates that they have in these points, because the rivers are silted up. Water cannot go to these rivers. So these people are facing waterlogging for months. There are some places in the coastal areas of Bangladesh where they get waterlogged for 6 months. Can you imagine? You are living in a waterlogged condition for 6 months, and what struggle they do in this situation. So I'm kind of skipping this slide. So this is a typical polder. So these are this is the embankment, this is the river, there is a sluice gate. So when there is high tide, they close the door in the sluice gate, so the water cannot enter the floodplain, and they are safe. That's how they can do agriculture. And when there is rainfall inside the floodplain, they open the sluice gates, the water gets drained out. But the problem is the river is silted and the river bed rose up, so the water cannot go outside the floodplain and stays here. And this is how this problem has been created for the local communities living in the coastal. It's a dangerous situation there. So this is how they live for 6 months of a year. And women and children are facing unprecedented challenges. Okay, men can migrate, men can go to different places for a job, but women are responsible for taking care of families, kids, and so I was talking to a woman when I was visiting this area in February 2021. No, February, no, in January 2021. So I talked to a woman and she got divorced because of the waterlogging. Her husband migrated and he never came back. He never came back. So this is a very common story in the coastal areas. If you go and randomly ask any women, you will find this scenario. So this is another picture, and you see this is how we are kind of transmitting the intergenerational inequity. Okay, this is the generation. This is not the only generation facing this problem. The next generation will also bear the problem. They will also be vulnerable to the same problem. So what went wrong? This might be the question. What went wrong? Okay, so the first problem was definitely excessive population pressure and excessive economic growth. That's true. The way we anticipated, the rate was even much higher and faster. And this was a extreme infrastructural intervention. Okay, I think you can possibly imagine 139 polders, thousands of kilometers of embankments. Maintaining these embankments, it's a very critical job, and that has not been done properly. So that is another reason. And as I said several times, the complex ecological dynamics have been ignored. So I'll talk about that later. So what is the local knowledge that has been ignored? I'm telling you several times. What is the local knowledge? I'll take 5 to 7 more minutes. What is the local knowledge? There is a thing called Ashtomashibad in Bangla. Ashtomashibad or Dosherbad. Okay. So this is the local practice that has been doing, that the people have been doing for centuries, not for decades, for centuries. What they do, they build a temporary embankment during the month of June and July, because that's the beginning of the monsoon. There will be more flooding and more rainfall. So they make an embankment that is temporary, and they protect their land, and they do the cultivation. And in December and January, they remove that embankment. Okay, so this is the embankment that stays for 8 months, and everyone in the community participate in this process. That's why it's called Dosherbad. And Ashtomashibad, it's because it stays for 8 months. 8 months in Bangla, it's called Ashtomashibad. Okay, so this is the local practice that they have been doing for centuries, and this is so environmentally friendly that the policymakers and the engineers have ignored and still ignore it. So from there, a local practice that has been developed is called tidal river management. This is a unique model, so I'm explaining it very shortly. This is the river, and on both sides of the river you see the floodplain, and there is a low-lying area in the floodplain. So they create a channel to connect the low-lying area, that is called a bill, with the river. Okay, and they make a cross dam on the river during the month of June and July. June and July, before the monsoon starts. So when the water flow increases, the water rush into this bill area and stays here for a while, and the sediments get deposited, and the water then goes back during the low tide. So this is the process that goes for 8 months. After 8 months, they remove this cross dam, and by this time, this part of the river has gained navigability. Okay, so the river siltation problem is gone, and the river has come back to its previous condition. So the water flow increased. When you are removing that cross dam, the water is pushing that part, I mean the upstream part of the river, with a greater force, kind of doing the same thing there. So this is called tidal river management, and this process has been developed from that local practice that I just earlier, and it's scientifically proven, as I said at the beginning, that local knowledge needs to be and a specialized knowledge through scientific experiments. You see, I have going through a paper, a very recent paper that published in August 2020, last year, in a journal called Science of the Total Environment. It's a very renowned journal. It's everyone's dream to publish research work here. So a group of scientists, not from Bangladesh, unfortunately, they did a study on the tidal river management, and they have scientifically proven that tidal river management can protect these communities from coastal flooding, not much degrading the environmental quality. So that's all about my coastal case. Okay, so I'm at the very end of my talk. I this thing I already have I also shared with my students. This is a news that recently came out in global media outlets that a huge volume of methane gas has been detected in the atmosphere of Bangladesh. So I'm now moving to the urban case. Okay, I'm done with my rural example. I'm now moving to urban case. So and this is something very dangerous for us. Okay, if this happens repeatedly, then we will be on the list of the climate change contributors. Okay. Until today, we kind of, in the global platform, we presented ourselves as a victim to climate change. Now, this indicates we can be a contributor to climate change as well. And that's possibly because of a poor waste management system that we have in our cities. So we need to address this. We need to utilize our own knowledge. I was talking to a garment factory owner a few days back, and he was telling me about a unique concept, and that should be the mindset of every businessman. That should be the mindset of every entrepreneur. This is how I tried to visualize what he told me, that you want to recruit people from different underprivileged class. You want to train them up, and you want to engage them in a recycling plant where he will collect wastes like plastic wastes, and he will extract oil and energy that he will reuse in his factory, and he will extract 30% of the raw material that the factory uses for clothes production from this plastic recycling. So this is kind of a very, this is visionary. Okay, every entrepreneur and businessman should have such vision in their mind, and that can solve the problem. Okay, so this is a very common picture that is published in many global and local newspaper, and showing this picture, the journalists try to tell us the population is a problem for us. I don't see population as a problem. Population is our resources. We need to utilize them. I remember the BRAC University session, and that Ahmed shared with me, and I listened to the speech by Rul Amin sir, and I was fascinated I was fascinated because the way he explained how these human resources can be converted into and useful resources by utilizing the local knowledge, local resources. So I want to end here. So the take-home message is, don't just read books, travel, go to every single corner of the country. I think you are muted, Ahmed. Sorry, I took more time, I think.
What I was saying, that thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. It was so informative. You know, you talked about the theories and structure of knowledge. You talked about the tidal river management, and I did not even know that, like how many amazing things, that can be done, which are unfortunately ignored in Bangladesh. And lastly, about the methane hotspot that we actually talked about very recently in class as well. So thank you so much, sir. And now I would like to introduce, and I would like to invite our second speaker, Mr. Tanvir Ahmed Haroon, sir, to speak on the fourth industrial revolution in the era of climate change, a portal to the future or an anchor of the present. So Tanvir, sir, if you would like to come on.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And Ekhtekharul, thank you very much. It was an amazing presentation stuff. So my topic itself is a bit of a mixed merger of all different things. One, the first, it is basically the fourth industrial revolution and how it's a link with the climate change, and it's literally looking into the future. What I have decided is that I have decided to basically, the reason I've decided this topic is for three basic reasons. One, at the very beginning, when you showed the video, when the video was being showed, a very important thing that, as he mentioned, is that we are running out of time. True. We are running out of time. We are running out of time because we are running out of time, we need a drastic change. We need a change, or we need the movement, a mobilization, so that a changes might happen. You heard from the previous speaker, you heard from everyone else, is that scientific innovations are there, scientific researches are there, everything is there, but still the changes are not being done. So why is not being done? How this fourth industrial revolution becomes a very vital part of it, that is going to be the basic focus of it. So what is the industrial revolution? Well, all of us, I think we all know by now that the basic industrial revolution that started at the beginning was basically the revolution to use steam engine, the power of the steam into making an automation process, reducing human burden. It was a miracle of that time. The second industrial revolution was the engagement of learning of electricity, the invention of electricity. From Tesla to everyone else, the modern face of the world has completely changed thanks to this electricity. That was the second industrial revolution. The third industrial revolution, by default, was computing, the power of computer. You and I are sitting right now. We are talking right now. These are all examples of the third industrial revolution. How computer came in being, how computer changed the face of the world from what it was to what it is right now. I have decided not to show any PowerPoints in this entire thing because it is much more of a focus that we need. Instead of depending ourselves on that, the human contact, the human emotion is the more important element over here. That is why my specific topic is that the fourth industrial revolution, the era of climate change, basically is it the portal to the future? We are stuck over here. Why am I so much engrossed about the idea about the fourth industrial revolution and how climate change is happening? See, climate change is a default. We know it has happened. We know it is happening, and we know our time is running out. But we all agree, through all the scientific researches, through all the science, through everything right now, we all agree that we have to do something very quickly. We have to start a change right now, otherwise it will be too late. How to start that change? What to do to start that change? How will that change make an impact? That impact can be done by the fourth industrial revolution. So what is the fourth industrial revolution in a simplest way? The fourth industrial revolution right now is a simplest way. There are two very simple concepts. One is called the M2M, machine to machine, and the other is IoT, internet and its connections. With this internet, its accessibility, its easy thing, what we have right now, we have a miracle. This is my cell phone. I believe you all have this. A single device. Right now, its processor is probably 10 times more powerful than we had even 20, 30 years ago. This single cell phone, one single device, is a combination of a camera, has internet inside. We can basically not only talk to everyone, go to the net and see everything and communicate in every other form. So social media in its infancy versus social media right now, which is a key component of this fourth industrial revolution, is very different, because social media even 20 years ago, you and I needed to be sitting in front of a computer with my mouse and with my keyboards, and we'll be doing most of the things here. And now we have moved from there to a portable device, which has lots of power right now, a lot of batteries over there, and we are moving every part of the world, every part of the country, every part of the world, having complete access to the internet. With a second, getting in touch with everyone, the friends, family. It's just an information overflow, or rather a chain reaction of information. That is the most important part of this fourth industrial revolution. Accessibility, and it can reach to the remote corners of the world. How is it important? Why is it a key component of the change? We have seen that the fourth industrial revolution, the invent of social media, has not only changed but created revolutions, has mobilized people in ways that we could not ever have fathomed before. And for climate change, or to tackle that climate change, that mobilization is far important than just going through our regular ideas, just going through our practices. Enacting laws are that important, and enacting laws can be, or The laws that enacts or that have been enacted can only be properly followed if social mobilizations are being done. And this is our primary tool of social mobilization. Two concepts, a portal to the future. Why do I say it's a portal to the future? Look how the Arab Spring happened. The entire Arab Spring in the Middle East, the entire Arab Spring that literally changed the face of what it was, began with one single social media. Either Twitter, or you go to Facebook, or you go to anything, that is where it has begun. That is the chain effect. That is the chain reaction. A reaction that starts and a reaction that is able to change. We have been arguing on the changes of climate change. We wanted the changes of climate change. We have been pushing for the changes of climate change. We wanted to do, we have to do this, we have to do that for the last 15 years or so, and more than that. Has it changed? Were we able to change it? No, we are not able to change it. We have, if I would honestly say, I would say we have failed in a lot of ways, because each time, each day is progressing, each years are progressing. We are just jumping into ideas. We are giving a lot of solutions, but no solutions are being implemented. How to make that implementation happen? That implementation can only happen through our social media, through the fourth industrial revolution. Generation is the third biggest factor over here. Everyone sitting in front of the computer right now, the next generation, even the younger generations, they all have a cell phone with them. Parents decide to give a cell phone or a tab to a kid, to a 1 year, 2 year old baby, so they will be much more busy with that and they can do their work. Not completely healthy wise, but I think it's changing over while, but still it is there. So we see that this access to this technology, this access to the internet, this access to devices, this access is there from the very beginning. So one of the things that it can be done without any doubt, one of the things that can be done at the fastest way is imprinting the importance of climate change and what necessary changes needs to be done, starting from the very beginning, from the very basics, which is the very youngest, till the generation that comes, each successive generation. So someone getting into high school, someone getting into preschool, if they are aware that they have something called climate change, and the effects of climate change will be this way, this effect will become like this, you do this to reduce the effect like this, only then that changes can happen. And that change can only be there if we can imprint the idea, if they literally, every one of us understand the importance of climate change. You see at the very top, the hashtag, solve climate by 2030. If we do not start that imprinting change right now, there will be no solution of climate by 2030. We will have thousands of research papers. We will probably have 1 million ideas. We will probably have 100 principles that we want to do that, but nothing at the end of the day is changing unless we have a complete social mobilization. So the invent of AI, artificial intelligence, its usage, apart from its usage, at the very, Ekhtekharul did talk about communication with different people, right? And I think the best way for the communication to happen is for us to understand that theory and practice are two different problems. We are so much engrossed, and I am sorry to say, it's my personal opinion, it might not be in line with a lot of people. The scientific community is too much engrossed in its theories rather than always in the implementation and practicalities. And I believe that is something where the entire scientific community is lacking, because we do not put the practicalities in the extent that it is acceptable by the entire community, by the citizens, by the people general. We are not being able to do something. But through the fourth industrial revolution, we can literally move for a climate change factor over there. And I believe that is very much practical, and there's an example to it. The simplest example is COVID. How COVID, in the last nearly over 1 year, a bit over 1 year, has literally shifted this thing. Who believed that we would be sitting at home doing this type of online things? Majority of the time we'd be sitting in the institution, we'd be in front of an audience, and we'd be talking. Work from home, a new concept, which is not exactly something that most organizations like, but which is still practical. not traveling every day to another part of the world itself for a small meeting, which is a very big deal in the European region. Right today, the CNN and the others, there was a news coming up that the frequent flyers who are traveling really needs to stop their traveling to reduce climate change. And yes, reduce that by doing this. This is one of the biggest innovations of the fourth industrial revolution. It literally proved that what we can do, how much it has moved forward, and what can be done to reduce the climate change factors. Automation, technology, internet, communication devices have changed the entire landscape. Right now, we can have a meeting with everyone sitting abroad in 5 different countries. Why? Because we have this 4IR, industrial revolution. When I was talking about imprinting, how does imprinting create the social mobility? If every generation, starting from preschool, high school, and the others start moving, forcing that we can do this, this should not be done at home, that creates a social mobilization. It creates your mobilization at home. It creates the mobilization at your institution. It creates the mobilization at the workplace. And when these 3 places are forcing the social mobilization, policymakers will take that thing into account. And that mobilization changes would happen. So social mobilization through imprinting, through the 4IR is the biggest thing. This is our portal into the future. Why am I saying this portal is into the future? Because this COVID has literally shown us we can still sit at home and we can do works. What is the best innovation we can do? Probably we can decide, I don't know if the institution, the government has decided that every year, probably each country at one point of the month will stop everything and do a work home policy. It can be done. Reducing electricity, reducing burden on the other things will definitely reduce them. We have the options, whether we are willing to take them or not. Whether we are choosing to take those options or not will become the biggest thing. And that is where the mobilization of the 4IR is the most important thing. That's what I personally believe. We have seen it through the Arab Spring. We have seen it through all the other places that I have mentioned. Entire schools are being taken online, worked online. We are taking our classes online, which I am completely sure that 1 semester, 2 semesters is fine, but having regular 1 year and over that does put a toll. But we can actually do that. By doing that, we have reduced the environmental stress that happened on the earth, and the first few months of COVID has shown us that. The amount of reduction on global carbon emission that could have been done. If we can do it, can we continue or not? Should we continue or not? Institutions will not agree to it. You and I both know that. No institution will typically agree with it. But if the individuals, if the society, if everyone is willing to push forward with it, then it's willing to. Social media and the word viral works really well because it literally spreads like wildfire. Proper information, a good thing, works well. But right now, at the topic at the end, there was another thing that I mentioned, will it anchor to the present? Why am I calling to the anchor to the present? Technological innovation, technological development is pushing us into a new frontier, this virtual frontier, with Microsoft coming up with the new type of complete virtual, in a way, 3D virtual meeting scenarios where you will have your avatars sitting inside a room and having a meeting are a new feat for the future. We can literally see that the Google Goggle and medicines are working there. The doctors are using it, where people sitting from another 10, 20,000 miles away can actually see and learn from it as well. So that is the good innovation of technology. Now comes the worst innovation of technology. Technology at the end of the day is still a tool. How and who uses the tool determines how the future is being done. And that is where we believe that an anchor problem might exist. With the invent of AI, we also have something which is called deep fake. I do not know to what extent people are aware of it. You and I am talking right now. This is my communication. Someone can take this video, put it in an algorithm mechanism, can literally make me say things which I have never said, which probably I was not even there, but that is there. That is why it's called a deep fake. So that is why, if we are not aware, if this misuse of technology is still going on, the fourth industrial revolution may have a fantastic beginning, but I don't know how it's going to come to an end. Yet it is probably the only tool we have with us right now that can literally kickstart an innovation and change, that can kickstart a social mobilization, that can kickstart solving the climate by 2020 initiative and actually work. Practical, accessible, innovative, and reality-based. I think that is something we are forgetting. If it's impractical, hypothetical, or too much theoretical, futuristic, it's not going to happen. And time, at the very beginning, as it was said, is not on our side. That is my personal belief that the fourth industrial revolution in the era of climate change, it has tremendous potential, yet it has its own problems. How we choose to do it, how we play this game will determine the future. The future, that the choices that we make right now, we will see the effects within our own lifetime. The generational equities or the next generations or the others are the next part. But we will feel the effect. We will see it, we will feel it. So I think it's time for everyone, from the very higher up to the very bottom, to have dialogues and to start moving with the changes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanvir sir. That was absolutely informative. That was very amazing. You talked about how technology and social media and the fourth industrial revolution can shape the future of our environment and the climate change, and how the social mobilization can contribute to it as well. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I would also like to mention that we also have Dr. Khandukar Ayaz Rabbani sir over here, the head of Environmental Science and Management of the School of Environment and Life Sciences. Thank you so much, Rabbani sir, for joining us tonight on this seminar. And right now, I would like to give the stage to our third speaker of tonight, Mr. Shohail bin Saifullah, who is the project associate of the International Center for Climate Change and Development. And before I do go on to that, I would also like to ask the audience, you are all encouraged to ask questions to any of our honorable panelists tonight. It is an open discussion. Our panelists will definitely answer your questions at the end. We will definitely have a question section, so please do ask your questions as well. So thank you. You're up.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Shohail bin Saifullah. I work at the International Center for Climate Change and Development as a project associate under the issue-based program of climate finance and the youth program. Before I start, I'd like to say how huge of an opportunity and privilege this is to share the panel with my faculties who were my teachers at my university while I was pursuing my bachelor's degree. So with no further ado, I'd like to start. Wait, let me try and share screen. Right. Is my screen visible? Hello?
I say yes, it is visible. It is visible.
Okay. So my presentation or my talk is going to be on youth's role in policy and governance. Now, before starting, I'd like to always open my talk on this topic to be with this sentence, because I feel that this sentence sort of concentrates the whole idea of youth and governance into one sentence. And the sentence basically is, if we are to make our youth population leaders of tomorrow, we'll think and act towards tackling climate change. We need to empower them now. Now, the idea behind that is that in Bangladesh, if you take that in perspective, the age cohort of 15 to 25, who are considered the youth of the country, make up to 30% of the Bangladesh's population in 2020. Now, it is by no stretch of the imagination that children will be a bigger sufferer of climate change and its adversities compared to adults. Now, we talk about the adversities of climate change, but we need to also understand that climate change, youth, governance, all of this is basically a cross-cutting theme, because we need to understand that climate change and all of the topics that I mentioned requires the use of SDG 13, which is climate action, SDG 4, quality education, and SDG 5, which is gender equality. So we need to take into account of all of these ideas while we're talking about youth and climate change. Now, following up with that, let's bring it back into a global perspective. In the world right now, there's 3 notable places where we see climate action done by youth on a grand scale. One of them is Fridays for Future, which was incepted by Greta Thunberg after she did her peaceful protest for taking climate initiative. And the idea behind that is that their goal is is a movement where they try and bring together scholars, students, youth, policymakers, and allow them to basically pressurize the policymakers to take in youth advocacy and youth's word while taking initiative for climate action. Next would be the Youth Adaptation Network, which is basically incepted by GCA, or Global Commission on Adaptation. And their idea is that creating an environment where young people are allowed to have a stake on the table and have their voices heard on a grander scale, in a global scale, is basically their forte. Following on to Youngo, which is a youth constituency of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And they basically work on a multifaceted approach. It's basically, they have working groups of youth all over the world. One of my colleagues is also a part of this youth constituency, who are currently working together to the road to COP26, which is going to happen this year, as well as which is also the young youth COP, which is going to happen right before. Now, I'd like to bring another idea onto this, is the phrase that I just mentioned, that stake on the table, their voices to be heard. Now, one of the major things that I've heard, or one of the major things that I've seen through all of my experiences, is that the main thing that comes out from youth in advocacy is that youth are taken onto a table or onto a panel only just because of a quote-unquote tick box exercise, where they need to showcase that, look, I have a few youth members on our panel or on our program or on our community who are taking charge, but in actuality, they're just there to hold the space, so that whenever a finalized report or a project report is produced, it shows that we had youth, we had work done. So basically, it was the youth who led the work. But in actuality, they're just there as a sort of a mannequin approach. They're basically bystanders when it comes to actual policy dialoguing. So I'd like to go forward with policy dialoguing and youth, because with the idea that youth have a voice, and it is a huge tendency of youth to have the energy to do activism work. Now, the 2 photos that I'd like to bring our attention to is basically, one is from India, which was basically a youth demonstration in India, was seen in the 2019, which basically advocates humanitarian approach towards climate action, and how the time is now to act on climate change, rather than dilly-dallying on our tables with scientific papers. We should immediately start about seeing how we can approach this in these cross-cutting issue. The next thing would be basically Extinction Rebellion March, which was held in 2018 in UK. Now, I really like the banner, which states, "Business as usual is killing us." Now, it's a very interesting topic when I say business as usual, is because, as one of our panelists also mentioned, Tanvir sir, who mentioned that business as usual in terms of the normal that we had. The normal that we had, quite frankly, didn't work. It was a facade that was maintained so that it could show that, look, climate change in action, and we're actually working on it. But in actuality, if we went through that path, none of the agreements that we have, the Paris Agreement or the current slogan that we have, "Stop Climate by 2030," that won't really work. We need to rethink, re-strategize, and also take into consideration of the community-based knowledge that we get for all of this, so that we can actually have a new normal and new approach towards tackling climate change. Now, Now let's dive deep into Bangladesh perspective. It's not that Bangladesh is really backwarded when it comes to youth activity. Bangladesh has very intricate and very strong youth voices. From one of my field visits in 2018 in Satkira, I was able to find out that 2019, I believe, 2019, is that during Amphan, the major predictions for damage that was supposed to happen was mitigated due to youth, because it was seen that the early warning systems, the red flagging, the basic awareness raising was done through youth groups. And what the idea that they brought around with this is that the local governing body was not really paying attention as to how their boulders, or say their embankment, was being endangered because of the upcoming tidal surge. So they tried to bring in their attention by forming a human chain on the embankment. Now, taking into account that these are youth who are in their teens or their early 20s, taking initiatives such as this is pretty mind-boggling. That brought in attention for the news and the media, and as well as sort of strong-armed the governance into allowing them to be better adapted to tackling the incoming storm. As well as, one of the more interesting examples that I was able to find out from there is that Satkira has a very poor sense of networking when it comes to road and transport. And since these were youth, they couldn't really come up with an idea of how could they raise awareness on a mass scale without having to pay out money. So they were very resourceful by finding out how many of the people in their youth group had motorcycles. And from there, how many of these youth groups had sort of a mic at their home. The people who had the motorcycles basically drove around the cities, and the person with the mic basically sat behind the driver and raised awareness that, hey, a storm is coming in. Please try and be as well prepared as possible. Try stocking up on rations. Try heading to the cyclone shelters whenever possible. And as well as try and be as much mindful of your surroundings as possible. Try and help people. Now, I see that as building social capital, because if think of it this way, if we try and capacitate the youth, we're in a sense making agents of change. These are the people who will be driving the force forward. There won't be really needing of a higher authority who basically has to push these youth. If we capacitate the youth themselves will take care of it, because they're pretty well versed when it comes to activism. All we require is the knowledge, and all we require is the development. So with that, I'd like to come up with I'd like to showcase the problems that we're seeing. One of the major problems that we have is the education barriers, the institutional barriers, the lack of credibility, and lack of financing. Now, educational barrier is basically the very easy to understand here, is because I may have the energy or the vocation to raise awareness through my activism, but if my activism is misguided, it's not really going to be of any use, or is not going to be of any work. So we require to push these people towards understanding what the major problem is. This may be through actual direct education or indirect education. Well, the direct education would be through classes or climate classes, A classes, or through workshops, webinars. The indirect approach that usually we tend to overlook is basically through allowing these people to get involved with other stakeholding organizations who work with these aspects. That brings me to institutional barriers. It's not really an easy aspect for a youth to be taken up through other organizations where they can go through training. Usually these things are pretty cutthroat when it comes to competition, or even if not, it's not really easy for them to get access to, because they require maybe they're not really well versed in English and the whole course was in English, or the topic that they were given was not really well explained. Now, if education institution basically goes hand in hand, one helps the other out. Now then comes the lack of credibility. If we're able to secure the first two, credibility comes along with it as well. Now, if a person or a youth comes along and says, I understand the problem here and I want to help with solving it with the method of X, Y, and Z. Now, the person would not really be taken seriously unless and until the person can produce, look, I have gone through training from here and here, and I am credible in terms of my understanding. Therefore, that person will be taken into consideration then. And then comes the final and most tricky aspect, which is financing. Be it an organization, be it a governmental organization, be it an individual, financing is always a tricky aspect. Is because we need to take into consideration all these stakeholders who will be involved in this ideology that and will be working towards it. And it's not always that, if all stakeholders are on the same plane, that financing will be done right. Financing will also be a tricky problem because we need to take into consideration that there will be some stakeholders that we need to make them happy so that our future projects will be funded. And that is also something that requires training. And again, that also goes hand in hand with the first three topics that we explained. Now, if we're to talk in Bangladesh's perspective, Bangladesh is a growing country, but we also need to take into consideration that Bangladesh, in the population of the 43.8% of the population are under the poverty line. That means that they earn roughly $1.25 per day. Now, that is a requirement that needs to be filled because a person who has more mindset towards trying to make a livelihood will not really be able to understand the whole gravity of the climate change and how that's going to affect the community and him or her or anyone else. And as well as that needs to be fixed, because if a person needs to be adaptable towards climate change, that person needs to be self-sufficient in the first place as well. Otherwise, there needs to be separate donor or helping agencies that needs to aid this person. And this is very problematic because if we take into consideration, Bangladesh is the 7th most climate affected country according to Global Climate Risk Index in 2020. Now, climate stressors will have a more profound problem or more profound impact on the youth compared to adults. Now, I say climate stressors, but we also need to understand what are climate stressors. Climate stressors can also be considered as any issue that is caused due to climate change. This may be direct, again, be it erratic rainfall, be it drought, be it irregular tidal surges, etc. It can also be indirect. Now, there was a survey done by Save the Children Foundation in 2020, which found out that majority of youth have a tendency of suffering from something that is known as climate anxiety. Now, climate anxiety is a very new term and a very new topic, which basically explains that the current youth are currently facing with the dilemma that how are we supposed to solve a problem which has very little or short amount of time, and if the solution is not right, it's going to make the situation a lot worse, and that brings in a lot more psychological trauma that we tend to overlook. Following into, now I've talked about all the problems and the researches that we have done, but let's talk about a few of the solutions that we can actually think about or talk about. Now, raising awareness, goes without saying, is one of the major tools that we have. If I am to take basic information from the previous two speakers, information right now is the most easiest way of raising awareness, and information can be disseminated very simply right now. If we look into consideration the current stream that we're having, the current talk that we're having, we have an audience base which is a lot bigger than we would have if we were in a classroom or in an actual workshop. Now, that brings me to the idea of workshops and seminars, or in this case, a webinar. The more the opportunities that we give to youth, the more they will be able to be capacitated. Therefore, if we allow for other NGOs, think tanks, organizations, governmental organizations, schools, to allow these youths to be able to take part in workshops and webinars. As a personal anecdote, I remember when I joined when I was in my bachelor's degree, our faculties had this tendency of forcefully sending us to webinars that we didn't have an interest to go. But we thought it was being forceful. But in hindsight, it is actually allowing us to understand that, oh, this is something that I didn't know about. It was just my preconceived notion that I knew about the topic. That is why I didn't want to go. But from here, I learned a lot more other things, which I would not have known if I didn't go. Therefore, allowing for opportunities to allows them to rise in capacity as well. Now, I've talked about what is stakeholders. I've talked about climate risk, but for the general populace, these two terms can come off as pretty hard and as a sort of a jargon, a scientific jargon. But taking into consideration that a scientific jargon, something that the audience cannot understand. Again, I'll refer back to a report I was reading that 75% of the audience tend to lose their attention when tough words or jargons are being thrown at them. Therefore, it's easiest to start explaining with that what climate change is, what global warming is, what stakeholders are, who are the stakeholders, and how do they interact with one another. Then, as I mentioned, that helping with dissemination of information. Information right now is key. Again, from a personal experience here, one thing that my dad taught me at a very young age, and something that I truly honed to myself even now, is that information is a sort of like a key. If you understand something, that something has lesser of an opportunity of going wrong. The lesser information that you have, the more the probability you have of the situation going wrong. Therefore, information is always key in terms of solving a problem. Now, the last solution is always a controversial one. Move them away from voluntarism. Because voluntarism, albeit people say that voluntarism is dead, but voluntarism is not dead. It's just that it has turned into a cliche. Because it is seen that no matter any sort of work that you have, be it for a good cause or be it a mundane task, people will try and get it done through voluntarism because it's, for lack of better words, cheap labor. If you're able to incentivize it and make them understand that, even if you're not able to incentivize it, if you're able to make them understand that this voluntarism is going to aid you in something that you're going to be able to do later on in your life, it's going to aid you in helping help you come up with a solution, or it's going to build your character. So it's usually seen as a cliche, but if you're able to incentivize it, it's a lot easier to get more people on board. Now, bridging the gap of what we talked about. I'd like to take as an example. I was a student not too long ago. I joined an organization very recently, and from then on, I tried to take in as many opportunities that I was able to get to. And it's all the things that I spoke about can sound very generic, but these things do tend to work out in a sense that I do have a few colleagues who work with very notable international youth organizations who have a say in how the youth governance and youth policy will be dictated in terms of climate change. I myself am a part of the Club of Rome and Penn State Sustainability Institute's collaboration Global Youth Engagement Program, where we try and meet every week and discuss how we're trying to take our project forward and have a dynamic idea towards help solving climate change. And it's not only that the youth we work with is from one set of cohort or one set of group. We have people from all over the world. That allows for diversity and as well as better understanding of opportunities. Because I may not understand a situation from our country, but it can be seen relatable to someone who has faced it in, let's say, in Kenya. So it's always easier to have a broader sense of understanding when approaching a problem. And as well as it's also possible to get the youth voices heard if the youth can be capacitated and as well as pushed with the right driving force. Now, I'd like to basically bring all of that together and consolidate them into 3 points here. I won't take too long. I'm almost done with the presentation. One thing would be is more governmental involvement. Currently, our government is being very, very well involved in this because yeah, the Global Center of Adaptation was launched roughly last year, and it was a major allowance for all of our organizations in the country to be able to work in a international scale, as well as the youth work with a lot of governmental organizations in our perspective, so that they can be seen as a social capital later on when they go into the workforce, if they're capacitated well beforehand. Strengthening both formal and informal education. As I mentioned before, formal education is always key. It's always necessary, from your schools, from your university, or from your post-university. But informal education is also necessary. Being able to relate those studies that you were taught in your formal education and then relaying it into your work field or your volunteerism or entrepreneurialism is the key to driving it forward, and as well as more collaborative approaches. I'd like to take this example in our current webinar that we're having. We have people from a plethora of organizations aiming to work towards one simple goal of helping and as well as tackling climate change. Help understanding and tackling climate change. Therefore, more collaborative approaches that we have, the more our the work gets unified, more our force gets unified. Therefore, it's easier to tackle a problem head on, and as well as rather than being disjointed. Now, as I started the talk with an opening note, I'd like to end with an ending note as well. We need to start pushing youth into locally led actions and community-based policy dialogues and allow for a better youth engagement. Here, I'd like to take into account one of my favorite faculties, Ekhtekharul sir, who presented before, that scientific knowledge and indigenous knowledge, they seem to have a disconnect when it comes to tackling climate change or tackling a community-based problem. Therefore, if we're able to allow scientific knowledge to flow through indigenous knowledge or vice versa, and then applying it into a locally led community-based action, and as well as capacitating the youth through those actions, I believe that it's going to allow the youth to grow better in terms of understanding climate change, and as well as allow their voices to be heard on a grander scale. For any further questions, I'm always available at my ECAD web link. So that's all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Shohail bhaiya. Thank you so much for that amazing speech. You know, you talked about how youth play a major part in the shift in governance and the opinions regarding climate change in the modern era through the activisms and the movements, and we really appreciate you giving your thoughts on it. So to end off the session tonight, we're going to discuss a few questions from the audience with our esteemed panelists. To start off, an audience member asked, I would like to bring up everyone over here to all of the sirs. And the questions, one of the first questions that I would like to ask, that an audience member asked, is question to Ekhtekharul sir. Number one, what are the effects of current embankment failure by cyclone in the coastal region? And second of all, can we face the similar problem in the proposed local tidal management system?
Okay, thank you, Ishtiaq. These are very good questions indeed. I'd like to start with the first one. The cyclone Ayla, if you remember, that happened in 2009, I believe. Yeah. So if you go to Satkira and Shamnagar, you'll still see the footprint of that cyclone exist. You still see the damages that occurred almost how many years? 11 years back. So the cyclones that were built in 1960s have not been taken care of properly. You know, you need to check those embankments, you need to renovate them. So this has not been done properly. So they are in a kind of in a very fragile condition. So Cyclone Ayla was not kind of it was not a high category cyclone. It was a normal cyclone, but the storm surge that kind of collapsed all the embankments and flooded all the areas in the coastal areas that we didn't forget. Yeah. So yeah, embankments need to be properly managed, and that was recommended when the project was taken and implemented back in 1960. in every 30 years, the embankment needs to be renovated, but that's rarely done. And the second question is very important question. The Tidal River Management Project that is now getting kind of a widespread attention. It has its own challenges as well. You are right. So the first challenge, there are several challenges. I don't want to focus all of them. I just want to share two challenges. The first challenge is the governance challenge. Okay, you see the engineers, the Bangladesh Water Development Board, they have been doing this embankment job for years, and all on a sudden you tell them, okay, you take my method. Okay, that's not going to happen so easily. Okay, they have become an engineer through a lot of struggle, right? They are not going to accept the knowledge of the local people who are not even educated. So that's one challenge. So there is a political economy behind that. And the other challenge is the bill that I talked about, where the water comes in, the sediments settle down. These are the places where people live, where people have their agricultural land, where people do farming. So when this bill is taken for this TRM, Tidal River Management Project, these people will not be able to do anything on that land for 10 years or maybe 5 years. So you will have to compensate them. Okay, and that Bangladesh Water Development Board has implemented 2 TRM projects in Satkira. Okay, and initially the projects work well, but there has been a lot of chaos at this moment because the projects are not working well, because the people who are supposed to get compensation from this project, they didn't get that compensation on time. Then why would these people leave their land? And there is another problem. There is cash land. I mean, the land that is owned by the government, but the local people have been using this land for years. Okay, so when the government try to kind of remove them from the government-owned land, there is this local conflicts and clash happening. Yeah, so there is challenges with this new TRM method as well, but much better than the Netherlands model.
Thank you so much, Ekhtekharul sir, for that for the information regarding that, and I hope Ahmed bhaiya, you got your answer to that question. Next question that I would like to ask, that I would like to bring up to the screen, is a question asked by Rabbani sir himself to Shohail bhaiya. So Rabbani sir asked, can you expand on the proposal to incentivize youth action? The advantage of volunteering is that activities are led not by economic reasons, but in many cases, a social cultural need. Volunteerism has a special place in solving social problems. So Shohail bhaiya, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Rabbani sir, if I may, incentivizing is not only considered in an economic standpoint. It can also be seen as a social or knowledge-worthy incentivization as well. Such as if we're incentivizing a youth cohort in the manner that if you join this course or join this program, you will come out after 3 months or 3 weeks with a sort of certification that you have worked under this and you are capable of understanding the problem. Say if, in my case, I was able to participate in this disaster management program by the Bangladesh government and the Armed Forces Division, and that allowed me to have a certification after the program that I was able to participate in this, and I understand disaster management to a certain degree, albeit very preliminary. That allowed me to propel that into something else, which allowed me to build my own career or my own portfolio. That allowed me to get more volunteerism work. So it's not only economic incentivization that allows for youth to be interested in this, in a topic, but rather it also allows for incentivization can be seen in a sense of character incentivization or educational incentivization. I hope that answers, sir.
All right, thank you, Shohail bhaiya. Thank you so much for that. And right now, I would like to ask Tanvir sir something that I had in mind. So Tanvir sir, one of my questions was, How can Bangladesh youth play their part in reducing the e-waste that's been happening all throughout? You mentioned about deepfakes, you mentioned about a lot of other aspects as well. So what do you think? How can Bangladesh youth play, their part in reducing the e-waste that's been happening all throughout?
Well, the simplest way is that the number of e-waste that we have, first, we need to identify to what extent e-waste are we actually making here. That's the first part. The best way to do that is that to ensure that everyone knows that every device we decide to change after every 1 year, 2 year is a huge contributor to the e-waste, and to what extent we can sustainably use them. It will not happen. It will not happen normally because we have the accessibility to get them, which we should not. It is a very expensive device, but for some reason, Bangladesh, we can get the most expensive devices and a moment's notice, and we have access to it. So that's the first part. The first part is that awareness. How can you give the awareness? You ensure that they know the effects that this thing has in the overall environment, which is not going to work because no one will care what's happening to the overall environment. The effect that this will have on them. What effects will this thing have in the long term on them? Probably if you start using that, it will change. But I am sure the two things will not happen. This generation who are right now, the generation who are in the universities, the generation who are nearly graduating from high school or college or joining in the university, the changes will not be for them. Not happening. You want this change to happen? Start ingraining, imprinting the idea to the younger generation, so that by the time they come up over here, they know what's going to happen. We cannot suddenly start changing the minds, the principles of anyone. Just look at the COVID situation. Everyone is asked to stay home. Who's following? Who's listening? No one. You go to the restaurant, the first thing you'll find out, they're all university, high school, nearly graduating kids there at the restaurant 24/7, day by day. Why are they there? Why are they not being stopped? Who's not stopping them? There's a lot of questions to it. It's not a simple answer. It's actually a very complicated mechanism, especially for Bangladesh.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. That was very informative. The next question that I would like to ask to Ekhtekharul, sir. Sir, you mentioned about the local knowledge, right? You mentioned about the structure and the theories and everything that's regarding knowledge. So, how can youth help to implement that local knowledge in itself? Like, how can youth, like as the question that Rabbani sir also asked, but how can youth help to implement that local knowledge through their activism as well?
Okay, very good question. But I think that the youth should decide how to utilize their time and effort behind everything. I think that would not be appropriate if I advise what to do. Okay, so what the take-home message from my discussion, I believe, is I encourage every student to visit every single corner of the country. Okay, and not just the country; it can be outside the country, and we have a tendency to go to the popular places like Cox's Bazar and St. Martin, right? So that needs to be changed. We need to go to places not with 100 people, with 10 people, with the friends that you are, the people who are very close to your heart. Okay, and I think we need to develop a culture of respect for others. Okay, I have students from different groups, and I sometimes feel that when someone speaks differently, others readily starts to criticize the way that person speaks doesn't meet the standard of the class. So we have to break this cycle. We have to be more people-centric, and we need to travel every single corner, and we need to closely observe, and too much. How should I conclude? Like, not too much focus on PowerPoint slides that we provide. Okay, do some extracurricular activities, and because this is the time that you will never get. I think Tanvir bhai will agree, and even Shohail will also agree. When I was a student, I had a lot of time to do whatever I want to do, but now I am in a very kind of I'm forced to maintain the everyday things, isn't it? So yeah, I think we should go out of our comfort zone.
All right. Lastly, these are very broad questions that I would like to ask all three of you. So there are two questions. The first questions that I would like to ask is, should greater importance be given to agriculture or transportation to improve the environmental conditions? I would like to start off with Tanvir sir, if you would like to mention anything, and I would.
Okay. Agriculture or transportation? I wouldn't say you can, there's no choice over here. It has to be equal for both. We are having good agriculture. It's not that we have transportation problems. We have mismanagement of the transportation. That is our biggest problem itself. If we do a proper management, it works. 95% of our transportation, by definition of transportation, my clarification is that starting from road networks, from designing road networks, from maintenance road networks, the whole charades is basically being mismanaged. You fix that, your transportation will become far smoother, your agriculture will become more efficient. One of the biggest problems with agriculture is efficiency is not reaching when time to time, getting stuck in places for hours and hours. That is the biggest problem here. So that's A. Now, this thing has two dimensions. If you're talking about urban, it's a complete separate scenario. If you're talking from other places, transportation of agriculture from one point to the another point, that's a separate scenario itself. So I do not think we can literally say that either the transportation will be important or the agriculture important. I believe that both of them are equally important right now, especially for us in Bangladesh. Every time, like we have Roja, cost of foods rocketing sky high, everyone's saying supply is not there. So when you're talking about agriculture, I think the third wheel over there is the people who are keeping it, ensuring that whether supplies are being reached on time in places or not. So all these three elements are, in my opinion, important, and they are equally important. One cannot trump the other.
Thank you so much, Tanvir sir. Ekhtekharul sir and Shohail bhaiya, if you would like to add anything to that.
Sohail, you want to add something?
Sir, you first.
Okay. I totally agree with Tanvir. He's right. There's nothing to pick like from agriculture or from transport. You have to focus equally on both. Okay. So our transportation system needs to be. I think we have a lot more space to improve our transportation sector. If I'm given option to choose from one, so there is more space in our transportation system to improve, because our agricultural system, and there has been a lot of modernization going on in our agricultural activities. If you go to the field, you will see the real changes. Okay, the solar irrigation, all these crop harvesting machines and everything. So there has been a lot of changes in our agriculture sector going on. These are the heroes that we never see in the newspaper. But the transportation, I think, if I'm asked to choose one, then I'll definitely focus transportation on transportation first. Yeah.
I very well agree with Ekhtekharul sir. Because if I were to pick one, I'd pick the transportation system, is because in our country especially, agriculture has been very well focused. If I were able to take 2 points, is because one of the points was I believe in 2019, I was fortunate enough to visit CCDB's. CCDB is basic Christian Commission Development in Bangladesh. Their Eco Technology Park in Gajipur, where they showcase so many agricultural advantages, basically solar irrigation, waterway irrigation, and using gravity to make electricity for your agricultural purposes. Now, these are examples that we have seen and as well as seen implemented, but it's not something, the same amount of innovation is not seen in the transportation segment. The one point that I'd like to point out is, recently, I believe yesterday, I was seeing on a news that Denmark has given a mandate that any transportation that can be done in 2 hours with a train does not need a domestic flight. So all domestic flights are canceled for those. So if your destination can be traveled in 2 hours with a train, you cannot go there by a plane. That way, they're trying to cut back on carbon emission. So these are some of the innovations that we're not really seeing in transportation industry right about now. Therefore, I believe that more force should be allowed in that direction.
Thank you so much, Shohail bhaiya, for that insight, and thank you, Ekhtekharul sir. And lastly, the last question that I would like to ask is, what do you think is the first step towards climate change in Bangladesh in order to really make a difference in a country like ours? I would like to first ask Ekhtekharul sir this question, and then going on ahead.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't get it properly.
I'm sorry, sir. So the question is, what do you think is the first step towards climate change in Bangladesh in order to really make a difference in a country like ours?
Oh, well, okay. Bangladesh is already doing very well in climate change adaptation. We are globally known. And we have some visible successes as well. Okay. So we are very known as a leader in the climate change adaptation sector. So we have been doing a lot. And I believe you are also aware of the fact that Bangladesh has also committed to reduce its carbon dioxide emission by 5%, even if we don't get any support from external sources, and by 15% if we get support from other sources. So I think we should focus more on how local innovation can support all these commitments to achieve. Yeah, that's what I think should be the priority in climate change strategy.
Thank you, Ekhtekharul sir. Tanvir sir, if you would like to say anything on this.
I first agree with majority thing what Ekhtekharul has said over there. Is there, but my personal view is that I don't think majority of us are actually serious about climate change. Majority of the people are not that serious about climate change. I still believe that in a country like Bangladesh, where policies can only be derived by the mass social mobilization, until we have that level of a societal push, you'll have very less actual policy changes that will have a proper effect. If a policy change is not there, if a social change is there, then I think that will over time enforce upon a policy change, and probably that is the best way to go. For every country like us, I think that is one of the best options. And for that to happen, a mass level of people's awareness has to be there, mass awareness needs to be there, and we need to decide to change our habits and priorities. I think that's one of the other biggest things right now. That's it.
Thank you so much, Tanvir bhaiya. Thank you so much, Tanvir sir. And lastly, Shohail bhaiya, if you would like to add anything to this question itself.
I'd like to try and bring all of that together. As Bangladesh is considered as whenever a discussion brings about adaptation, especially in terms of climate change, Bangladesh is seen as a bright example, because Bangladeshi people have a tendency of finding very innovative solutions for climate adverse problems. Especially granted the fact that our Prime Minister is also the president of the Climate Vulnerability Forum. It shows a very huge value that Bangladesh is taking strides towards making a change towards climate change. So I believe that we're currently on the right track. It's just that we require, if I were to say that we need change in one direction, it's in the education arena. I feel that climate knowledge, and as well as activism and the idea of how climate change works should be instilled from a very young age, so that as they grow up, they're able to understand it a lot better, rather than being an adult and then understanding that, oh wait, climate change is an issue. And I'd like to end with that, but also I'd like to correct myself. I gave the example of Denmark. It's supposed to be France. I was thinking of another example, so I mentioned Denmark, but it's France. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Shohail bhaiya, and that wraps up the Q&A section for tonight. I would like to thank all of you, to all of the honorable panelists, Ekhtekharul sir, Tanvir sir, Shohail bhaiya, for your amazing insight to all of the questions, to all of the things that you've talked about tonight. To wrap up our session, we just want to thank you all and for making the time to actually help us conduct this valuable webinar. And for more information regarding on the project, you can visit Solve Climate by 2030's official website. Thank you so much to the audience for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful end to the day. Thank Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.